Hi, welcome to the next video in the Data Librarian Bootcamp series from the Galicia Group. Today's video is Visualizing Public Library Data using Open Data, KML, CSV, and Google Sheets. Today we're going to make a somewhat more advanced map than our earlier map, still using the Google Maps tool, and we're going to actually be able to represent data in multiple ways on Google Map using the Layers tool, as well as some of the other tools mentioned on the previous slide. So this is our end result, what we're going to look for. We've got a county depicted with this gray shaded area, and within this is each of the public libraries within this county. So you can see here is Lincoln Library and some of the data about that library. Next to each library is the service area population. So you can see there's a large city here versus some of the smaller outlying areas as well. So let's dive in and create this map. Let's see how it's done. We're going to start with a brand new Google map here. And whenever we start with a Google map, we just see the US. Let's go ahead and give our map a name. And we'll skip the description for now. Great. Now, Google Maps is telling us that we can add places to the layer by drawing or importing data. And we've got the drawing tools up here. We can add a push pin to the map or actually draw lines or boxes or shapes on the map and have those saved. But we're going to actually go ahead and import data in a batch, and that's going to be a little easier. So as data librarians, we always have to find the data. And one of the great places to find information about libraries is the federal government's Institute of Museum and Library Services website. They have a data catalog at data.imls.gov. And one of the most useful data sets is the 2016 Public Library Survey. They've got data about each administrative unit, so each system of libraries. And then this data set that I'm looking at here is the outlets. So this includes the main libraries, branches, and bookmobiles as well. By default, you're looking at the data. It's just some information about the data, when it was uploaded, when it was last updated, who's responsible for it. And then there's what we call a data dictionary. So it describes each of the columns that are in this data set. Now, some of this stuff is specific to IMLS, but as you can see, some of this stuff is data that we want to use. So you can see here that we've got the name of the library, the system of the library, address, city, zip, county, etc. And this is all information that we're going to want to use. So this preview is pretty helpful. And there's some built-in tools we can use to explore the data on some of these data catalogs. So if I scroll back up to the top, there's a visualize button. Where I can create a visualization using some mapping tools here. I can also choose to export the data. Now, as we saw below, this is a pretty big data set. There are 17,000 rows in this data set and 36 columns. So this is a pretty big spreadsheet, in other words. In the preview below, we're only seeing the first 100 of the records. That's why we're seeing all of these in Alaska here. They're entered alphabetically by state. So let's look at another way of using this data. On a different project, thankfully, I have already imported this data and created a small application to make it easier to find specific libraries. So on our website, there's the library finder here, and I can search by state, county, or congressional district if I want to find libraries in a certain region here. So I want to find a list of every library in Sangamon County, Illinois. So I'll start by entering Sangamon in the search box, and here we go. I don't need to use the state field because there's only one Sangamon County in the country. So as I scroll down here, I can see there's a list of 12 libraries, and they're in this handy dandy table here. The name of the library, address information, and then here's our population, our unduplicated service area population count. So at the very bottom of this screen, of this table, there's a button that says CSV. So whenever we're working with data, CSV is sort of the lingua franca. It's the most common format used to transfer data. between software, between applications, different organizations, etc. So whenever you have a table of data like this, it's very common to see it in CSV format. So let's look at that a little closer. CSV stands for comma separated values. It's basically just plain text in rows, and the data within each row is separated by commas. So here's a definition on Wikipedia. Feel free to take a look at that later. And here's an example of what comma separated data actually looks like raw. If I download the CSV of that table, this is what I get. Again, this is just plain raw text, and each bit of data is separated by a comma here. So this is the simplest data interchange format used by pretty much any software application or website service that we might want to use. If I open this CSV up in a spreadsheet, which is the most common way to edit this data, you can see here it opens up very well in Google Sheets. It should open up fine in LibreOffice or Microsoft Excel. And here we've got, again, library name, address, city, state, and all of our columns. So just with this, we could go ahead and make a bar chart and base it on population, for instance. But we obviously want to make a map. So we're going to import this data into our map now that we've got it. So I'm going to flip back to my County Libraries My Map here. And again, back on my first layer, you can see that I have an import option. Let's talk about layers real quick for a second. Whenever we build an online map, we actually start with a base map. And you can see that right now we're looking at a default Google base map. It shows the United States and the state boundaries here, a few large cities. If I zoom in, it's the familiar Google map that we all know and love. Highways become visible as we zoom in. As we get closer and zoom in on where we know our county to be, you can see some of these familiar towns pop up as well. And again, I could look up each library individually and manually add them to the map, but we're not going to do that. So we've got our standard Google base map. Real quick, I'll point out that we can actually choose between different base maps. So here, for instance, is the Google satellite view, the default Google terrain view, not super interesting in Illinois, and then a simple atlas styling. Let's go ahead and use this just to make our map look a little bit different. All right, now that we've set our base map option here, let's go ahead and import our libraries. If I hover over the import link, you see it says I can import data from a CSV file, spreadsheet, or KML. Now, if I have the CSV file, I can go ahead and actually upload it directly from my device, or since I already have this file in Google Drive, maybe I don't already have this one in Google Drive. Let me go ahead and upload this from my local computer here. Here we go, sangamonlibraries.csv. Great, so we've imported our CSV spreadsheet of library data into our Google My Map as a layer. Now, we have a street address column, and Google needs to know exactly where these libraries are. This involves what's called geocoding, where a computer translates a street address into a translates a street address into a computer readable address, such as latitude and longitude. So for instance, Google here is telling us that if we have latitude and longitude, we can use those, but we don't. So all we need to do is tell Google that the addresses are in the address, city, and state column, and Google will calculate what the latitude and longitude is for each of these points. So let's take a look and see what that looks like. Okay, we've finished geocoding. Now we need to choose a column from our spreadsheet that Google will use for the title of our push pins. So when you click a push pin and the little info box pops up, what's the title going to be? So obviously we'll go ahead and use the title column, which is the name of our library. Click Finish. Wait for it to calculate and finish saving the data. Great. And here are our libraries mapped. So you can see that our untitled layer is now named after the CSV spreadsheet file that we use to import this data. And we can actually import multiple layers and then display them simultaneously. So maybe we want to upload area schools as well and be able to turn off the library layer and just see schools, or see them both at the same time. Okay. You can see here I can click on all items and highlight all of my push pins. And there's a little paint roller icon here, and it says uniform style. So you noticed on our target map, the map that we're trying to copy today, that each of the push pins was a different shade of blue. We can actually use the color of the push pins to visualize data from our spreadsheet. So let's see how that looks. Uniform style means that we're making every push pin look the same in this layer. But we have other options here. We can go ahead and number each of the libraries. Let's take a look and see what that looks like. Each library shows up in alphabetical order here with a corresponding number, and you can find the number corresponding on the map here. The next option is to do individual styles, and that's where we can actually choose a custom icon for each of the push pins on the map for each of the libraries. So if I choose this, I should be able to change the style of it here. Here we go. So I can actually choose different icons. Here's a star, and then I can choose the color as well. There actually is a library icon here. If I go to more icons, I can search for library. And there's the standard person reading a book icon that's used on road signs, things like that. There's also the ability to add a custom icon. There are websites that publish collections of icons that you can use on maps. So you can actually copy the link from the icon on a website like this and use that on your custom map here on Google My Maps. Okay, we'll go ahead and cancel out of that for now and look at our final styling option, where we can actually style by data column. Again, we have columns of data in our original spreadsheet, and one of our data columns was unduplicated population. So this is basically corresponds to your population service area. So how many people live in the area served by your library? Cool. So by default, it shows each one as an individual color here, and we want to actually put them into ranges. So we can see that the very faint libraries here, these lighter colored blues, have smaller budgets, and it increases to these larger libraries here that have a deeper color blue. The 4 is actually not really sufficient. We can actually bump this all the way up to 12 and see the color spectrum actually go from the lightest library here all the way down to the darkest color blue here. So again, these numbers are the population values for each library. So our smallest library here is a population area, a population of 1,485. It's here in Williamsville. And then on the other end of the spectrum, our largest library, Lincoln Library in Springfield, has a population of 116,924. And you can see that the colors that we've got here actually correspond to the values. One quick thing to show you on the layer, every layer does have an underlying data table. So remember, we imported this list of libraries from our CSV spreadsheet. And the data that we uploaded is actually preserved here. So you can change the data here as well. So you'll notice that none of these libraries have any 2016 federal revenue listed in the original IMLS data. we could change that column to something else, update the data here, and change the color of the icons based on that data, for instance. Okay, so there's one more step we need to match our original target map, and that's to display the outline of the county. So let's go ahead and actually take a look at the Add Layer button here. So remember, we have a map, we imported our spreadsheet, and it put these push pins on the map as a layer, and we can turn that layer on and off. We're going to add a new layer now, and it's a different kind of layer. This layer is going to be a polygon. So it's going to be a shape drawn on the map, not just a push pin. So we'll go ahead and click the import button again. And again, remember, we can import CSV files, but we can also import what's called a KML file. Let's talk about KML files for a second. A KML file is a special type of data file that encodes information about a place and the actual location about a place. And it's a very common format used on the web when we're doing online mapping of various locations. So here's the Wikipedia entry about KML, Keyhole Markup Language, if you're curious where that came from. It's a Google-derived standard, and again, pretty ubiquitous on the web. A good place to find KML files for locations in your area is the U.S. Census Bureau. So if you go to the U.S. Census Bureau's website, in the geography section, there's a whole page about KML boundary files. And the Census Bureau maintains all sorts of files. So for today's tutorial, we're going to look at counties, but you can also get the entire nation, individual states or regions, again, counties, congressional districts, tribal areas, and then when we go down to the state level, you can actually go all the way down to school districts, places, cities, towns, villages, etc., county subdivisions, census tracts, etc. So converting these or downloading these shape files and working with them is beyond the scope of today's tutorial, but I do have a KML file that I've already prepared for Sangamon County. So we'll take a look at what a raw KML file looks like. Again, it starts out, you can see there is some human readable data in here. We can see the name of the county, Sangamon. But then down below, we just see a ton of coordinates. And the mapping software that we use, whether it's Google My Maps or a desktop GIS software, knows how to interpret these maps, or excuse me, these coordinates into a map of the county. So let's go back to our Google My Maps. Again, we can upload a KML file, and I'll upload that Sangamon County KML file that we just looked at. Here it is. And it's saving now. We'll reload the page. Great, there it is, you can see it. By default, the county shows up as sort of a gray shaded area. Although again, we can change the color of that just the way we change the color of the push pins. Here's our Sangamon KML layer. I can click on individual styles. Excuse me, and change the style of that. There we go. Just by clicking the polygon, you can see I can actually drag these points around. Definitely don't do that. You want to keep using the official county borders that we got from the census area. You can see Google calculates their 878 square miles is the area of the county, and the county border is 148 miles. And if we click the style icon here, here we go. Got to click the little style bucket icon over here. We can actually change the border, how thick the border appears. And we can change how transparent or how dark the shading is within our polygon. So you see our base map is sort of this pink. Maybe we want to make the shading for our base map of our county blue here, or maybe even orange, yellow to contrast with our push pins. And then we can adjust the transparency and make that very yellow, or change that so the underlying base map still shows through. Great. And there's one more thing we need to do to make our map match our original map. The original map displayed labels next to each library. Now, the names of the libraries are too long to use effectively on the map. So for instance, if I change the style here, you can see I've got my labels option. It's currently set to no labels. If I set the labels to the title, you can see that the labels sort of override each other in some places, and it means that you can't see the other labels won't show up here. So instead of title, I thought it might be useful to see the population. So that shows up a little better. You can see for each library, well, the reason that this darkest library here is 116,000 people, and our lightest library up here, only about 1,500 people. We could also set the label to, for instance, the congressional district. So you can see which library appears in which congressional district here. Great. Just like any other Google map, once we've created it, we do have the option to share it. By default, only we can see a map that we've created, but we can go ahead and open this up to the world here, make it public so anyone on the web can see it, and click Save. Now, once we've done that, you'll see that we can embed this map on our own website. If I click this, you'll see there's an iframe link here, an HTML snippet. I can copy and paste that into my website's HTML, and this map will appear live, interactive, on our own website. And since we talked about KML, one other neat thing you can do is export this map to KML. So you can actually export this entire map, all the points and the underlying icons, and then import it in another map, use it in another application, or publish it on your own website. Great. So thanks for coming along and taking a look at today's tutorial, Open Data Visualization with CSV, KML, and Google Sheets. Thanks a lot. We'll have another video soon.